So, Scott, thanks for taking a minute to sit down with me again. I know you've had a busy week here at AAMI with ISO TC 210. Before we jump into a few questions, take a minute and introduce yourself to folks that don't know you. And I know that's like 3 people left in the world, but do it anyway.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Yeah, my name's Scott Colburn. I'm with the U.S. at the Food and Drug Administration, and I'm our Director of Standards and Conformity Assessment at the Center for Devices and Radiological Health.
Okay, and then that's your day job. And
That's
what are you doing
jobs.
here at
here,
AAMI?
Yeah, here at AAMI this week, my hats are session chair for the TC this week. Our chair was unable to be with us, Dr. Peter Linders from the Netherlands. He's rotating off chair. I agreed to try to help out and become session chair for him. And we wish him well as he continues on with his career and stuff. So I have a few other hats here. I'm here representing, as a convener to Joint Working Group 4, which is dealing with small bore connectors, and Working Group 2, which deals with a lot of common aspects that we have with medical devices, whether it's labeling or dealing with the essential principles of safety and performance. And that's been some of the work that I've been conducting here, as well as helping work our chairman's advisory group and helping establish the new liaison relationships that we have with regulators like the Global Harmonization Working Party and the International Medical Device Regulators Forum.
All right, so that's the area I want to dig into. So
Yes.
You finished right where we're going. Perfect. You'd think we scripted this. So say a little bit about the role of regulators in the standards work that goes on under TC 210 and all the other ISO or AAMI or ANSI committees. Say a little bit about how regulators engage with that process, because there's some nuances to both how they do that representing their national interest, how they do that representing a group like IMDRF. Say a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's been quite an effort over the last several years to engage with regulators from a standards perspective and trying to help lead that in ways that we can get true impact for regulatory voice at the national and global level. The key is trying to get both of those things coordinated, and it can be challenging, especially when regulators aren't familiar with the standardization system in their own countries and maybe aren't even aware of who their standards body is. And these are some of the things that we have tried to work in through organizations like the IMDRF, where we worked on a guidance called Optimizing Standards for Regulatory Use. And while we talked about what a standard should be constructed to help its regulatory use, we also speak to the importance of regulators participating in the standards development process throughout its life cycle, through both the national body and hopefully at the international level. And so we've been working through that, not just through the memberships of organizations like IMDRF and GHWP, but through that liaison role that we developed with ISO and IEC, are developing agreements to try to have them help us recruit through the communications of the national bodies in ISO and the national committees in IEC to see if we can get that recruitment effort and drawing those connections at the national level. The reason why this is so important is regulators are trying to communicate on a global scale to the common aspects to try to harmonize certain approaches. But we need to infuse that into the national levels as well, so that way when we receive comments, those things are taken into account and we can have international standards be international as much as possible and not interpreted differently across each jurisdiction.
Right. Now, I know that harmonization element, and people use different words. I'm using that one now, but the alignment, whichever word you want to use, is a critically important thing for all of our stakeholders, especially our manufacturers who are developing for a global market. So say a little bit more about IMDRF and the Global Harmonization Working Party and the members of those organizations, because some of those folks were here this week participating. So are they here representing their country, or is there a consensus voice from those committees that's represented by those individuals? How does that work? So if a country so we're trying to do some outreach here, right? So if a country that's not currently involved or engaged in the way that we want them to be, and this outreach works and they get engaged, what can they expect? So if they go participate in one of these groups, that's one path. If they go and participate here directly in the activities, that's another path. Are they redundant? Are they different? Say a little bit about that.
Yeah, and the answer is yes to many of those, and it depends on others. But I think what we are trying to see here, and yes, we have members here from a couple different delegations from the GHWP, Global Harmonization Working Party, where we have colleagues from Malaysia and Saudi's regulators here, both of them from the Global Harmonization Working Party. But coincidentally, they're not here at the table as an expert from those organizations. They are participating through their national body as experts. So
representing their country
from their country, but yet they are in the ability to make sure they're communicating back to their colleagues through the liaison role that GHWP has with
Easy
ISO
for you to
TC
say.
210. Similarly, within IMDRF, we have members from IMDRF, obviously hosting in the U.S. There are some U.S. representatives that are here as experts appointed through the IMDRF to help establish some of the global voice from that organization into the working groups and at the technical committee level, where they'll be able to communicate activities that are going on from those organizations. We also have regulators from FDA here as U.S. experts representing FDA as well. Sometimes that person may find themselves having to change hats and say, I'm a global regulator, I am the U.S. regulator, because there are at times differences in how the regulations are written or the approaches and how the use of standards are fit for the regulatory use. But in the end, our goal is to make sure that when we go back to the organizations of the global parties like GHWP and IMDRF, that we're getting to the regulators that are not present and not aware of the standardization process and using this as kind of a recruitment effort to get them engaged more, because that's truly where the power exists. When all stakeholders are engaged with all national bodies or national committees respectively, and helping get that voice from the national body to have that regulatory tone in it as well, and then using that, in collaboration to deliver it back into the global organizations they all represent.
Right. So how close are we? I know this is a problem we've been working for many years, and you may not be able to put an exact number on it, but with those two organizations we've mentioned a couple of times, you've got differing but large coverage, right,
Yes.
of countries. Are we halfway there in terms of the level of engagement you'd like to see from different nationalities? Are we almost all the way there? We're just hunting a few more to get to the table, or?
Yeah, I think there were some challenges in recent time. COVID made it, I think, very challenging for regulators to find the time and resources to be able to participate in standards. But also what happened towards the end of COVID when we started meeting again is things are in a remote or hybrid setting. And so we are beginning to see regulators be able to participate and learn about how to participate without a huge financial expenditure of resource, provided they can find the personnel expenditure.
It's more just a staffing issue, right?
It's growing. It's a process. I think prior to COVID, we were seeing a pretty good, scale up of this with interests. I remember at the some of the general meetings, or TC meetings that we have, 4, 5, maybe 10 regulators would be present. Just coming out of it, we're seeing maybe 3, 4, 5 at most. But they're still engaged. It's just trying to get that restarted. I'm very hopeful that I think with the engagement now of the category liaison from the two major parties with IMDRF and GHWP, that this will kind of snap back into place and continue to grow. We're really trying to promote it from within the TCs, and we're trying to make this more of a culture of ensuring that we're trying to get national and global regulatory voices brought in. Many technical committees have expressed an interest to have IMDRF and GHWP join their organization after they learned that they became a liaison with ISO TC 210 and IEC
An
TC
official
62.
liaison capacity, as opposed to that dual having sort of informal.
Yeah, so we have an official memorandum of understanding between ISO and IEC from an IMDRF to be able to join as a category liaison to certain committees. Now, we have to take that slow too, because we want to make sure when we're present, we are able to be effective, and we're not just that person representing the organization, but we have a purpose and role, and we can put that into work in a way that helps generate the harmonized voice that we're really seeking in these situations.
Right. So for as a close, for the folks that are in countries and looking at getting engaged that might not yet be engaged, I think the benefits to we've sort of pitched the benefits globally of all of this happening, and you can see that from the manufacturer's point of view. I think from the patient's point of view, the fact that a country aligns to global standards and therefore can more effectively regulate those devices and ensure their entry into their market or manufacture in their market. So there seem to be some obvious benefits for the individual countries and the regulators in those countries, but what are they? Are there any others? That we don't think about that are obvious. Obviously, being involved in the committees, they're going to have a better understanding of what's coming, sort of the future state of standards, which might impact their regulations. But sort of what's your elevator pitch to regulators that aren't involved today Maybe we already stole your thunder and named a few advantages, but what are the others?
It's very true, and it's a very similar pitch that we bring to any stakeholder. Knowing what's coming down the pike has its advantage to help prepare and adjust and coordinate, that within your own stakeholder group or your own country. But also being able to bring your flavor into what's coming is more critical to ensure that what comes down the pike may not be disruptive to what you're trying to do if you're working to rely on standards to help support whatever it is, whether you're a regulator or an industry member. So that participation early is important. To be engaged at some level is very critical. And we find that countries that are more engaged have a more robust opportunity, a more sustainable approach to be able to utilize standards for the regulatory use and help drive safer products into their country, help reduce, if they know how to utilize standards and the conformity assessment approach, how standards are used. They also find that they can control things like fraudulent activities that happen when people are bringing in falsified documents saying we're in conformance with such standard when in fact maybe they were not. The more educated a regulator or authority having jurisdiction has in these spaces, the better off they are in understanding how to use them. Being at the table, you get to share lessons learned, and you get to see how you can maybe mature your organization through that type of engagement. And again, now with the abilities to do things both in a remote, hybrid type setting, the burden to do so is a little bit easier. So we really want to try to get them here.
Right. I've heard people speak about leapfrogging. That Amy's 55 years old this year, and a lot of the regulatory framework started evolving in that time frame, and has gone through a number of cycles to get where we are now. And now we're in a proposed rule to adopt 13485 and really embed that into the CFR. Other countries don't have to go through that 55 years of sort of figuring out how to do this. They get to jump in sort of in the current state of the art. So that's pretty exciting.
But in 55 years from now, it'll be a whole different world of how we're working on it. So being present and trying to sustain it brings great value to your organization. I think the U.S. has been very fortunate to have strong leadership all the way from the White House administration level, showing the importance of being engaged in standards and conformity assessment activities. We work very closely with organizations like NIST, who helps coordinate the federal response to standards, and then through our departments and agencies, we have that coordinated aspect. So these things become very important and helps drive what we're trying to do at an agency level, but also coordinate it at a federal level too, so we can help get lessons learned and bring that back into our respective areas of standardization and what we do in the federal space.
And just all of that, you were talking about being at the table, being involved. The learning that can happen just in those kinds of conversations about those kinds of topics is unbelievable. So, Scott, thank you so much. I know you've been here 4 long days, and you're not done. You have another day tomorrow, so we'll wrap it up. And I really appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you.